Good afternoon and welcome to this very special program of Guyana in Transition. I'm your host, Michael Gordon. I have with me today attorney at law, Ms. Marcy and Nadir Sharma, and PPPC strongman. I like to refer to you,
Strong
Joe, as
man.
strongman
Idi
Joe.
Amin.
Joseph Hamilton. Colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to this special program.
Hi, Michael. Good day. Thank you for having us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having
Marcy,
us.
good day.
Both Joe and Marcy, since we last met,
Good day to you too,
uh,
Joe.
we would have had lots of events within the body politic of Guyana, and the Guyana Elections Commission would have been the hub of much of the activity since we've last met. We've seen dual declarations by the chief elections officers, dual and varying declarations by the chief election officer, a move by a private citizen to the appeal court. We saw that battle on the whether or not there was the appeal court has jurisdiction, and now our election issues have uh, been laid at the doorstep of the Caribbean Court of Justice. I'm going to ask you, Marcy, from with your legal training, to walk us through what has happened since the first Lowenfield declaration from a legal perspective.
Good afternoon, everyone, again. So as a recap, we have been in an elections mode for 114 days now. On the 13th of March, we had a declaration that was issued by Claremont Mingo District Returning Officer of Region 4. And following that, the issuance of that declaration, Mr. Lowenfield, the CEO, had indicated to the commission that he was ready, able, and prepared to submit a report for the purposes of Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act. That report was never taken to the commission because we would have been superseded by the CARICOM intervention and the Ulita Moore case, and then the subsequent recount, which took 33 days to be completed. Following the recount, which ended earlier this month, you would have had a report issued by CARICOM providing its observations and its assessment of what occurred in the recount, and then that was precipitated by a report being submitted, and I believe that was get my dates right, that might have been May 23rd or somewhere around there, was it? Anyway, the point is Mr. Lowenfield had submitted a report which was completely in variance to the results as the recount would have shown or reaffirmed. Now, let us go back and remember that the PPC has maintained since the 3rd and 4th and 5th of March that based on the SOPs, we had won the March 2nd elections. The recount also reaffirmed our very public position. Mr. Lowenfield submitted a report to the commission, which was completely outside of what the recount showed, what the actual election showed, and basically attempted to disenfranchise more than half of the 460,000 persons who voted at the March 2nd elections. That report also contained an accurate table that declared the PPC as a winner from the votes cast, valid votes cast. Again, those numbers came out of the recount process. He took the liberty to, outside of any powers, outside of, I don't know what went into his head, to be quite honest, to assume onto himself this power of judge, jury, and now implement executor in this case, in that particular instance. And that report, those tables that offered or suggested or attempted to disenfranchise half of the voting population was rejected by the commission. The commission, through the chair, gave him a specific instruction to submit a report based on the recount figures for the declaration. Then you had the case filed by Eslyn David, which sought to intervene and which essentially halted that process, or halted or prevented Mr. Lowenfield of his own accord, because there was no court decision that said he could not submit the report, but he took it upon himself not to submit and comply with the commission's decision. Last week we had, this week, it seems like last week, we had a decision of the Court of Appeal on Monday, and based on the Court of Appeal, Mr. Lowenfield yesterday submitted yet another report purporting to comply with the commission's decision or the commission's instruction to him to submit for the commission's consideration the declarations for the declaration of the winner, and by extension, the president of Guyana. And once again, Mr. Lowenfield submitted a report with numbers that are completely different to the recount figures, completely disassociated of any kind of logic, still attempts to disenfranchise 115,000 persons. I mean, one might say we should be grateful that that is no longer 264,000 persons and, 100, but you cannot, and he does not have any legal authority to disenfranchise a single person. He is not the High Court. He has no jurisdiction to determine who should be disenfranchised, about whether it is for whatever allegations that there may be. It is not his job. It is not his function. And so that's where we are. Following the Court of Appeals decision on Monday, most persons will be aware that we have since filed an appeal with the Caribbean Court of Justice to seek clarification on some aspects of the ruling. And I mean, I guess I could go into that a little later unless you wanted to do it now. But Michael?
I'm very anxious to get to, and it is directly related to a comment you made. And Joe, I'm going to bring you in shortly, but we saw moments ago the chairperson of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, Maya Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, who in essence, her comments mirror those by you in relation to the powers of the chief elections officer, relating to his ability or his inability to disenfranchise a single voter. This is also in addition to the embarrassing situation that Guyana has found itself in as it relates to the continued delay of our 2020 elections results. I'm going to play an excerpt of Prime Minister Motley's presentation moments ago.
Sure.
Observed with great sadness what has been transpiring in Guyana. It is more than 100 days since the people of Guyana went to the polls, and yet there is no declared result. From the very beginning, we have been clear and said consistently that every vote must count, and every vote must be made to count in a fair and transparent way. Regrettably, we have seen a level of gamesmanship that has left much to be desired and has definitely not portrayed our Caribbean region in the best light. This is definitely not our finest hour, and we must not shy away from that reality. The Caribbean community is concerned at reports that the Chief Elections Officer has submitted a report to the Guyana Elections Commission, which is contrary to the directions given by the Commission and which does not reflect the results of the recount process as certified by the very staff of the Guyana Elections Commission and indeed witnessed by representatives of the political parties. Indeed, these numbers and the certification of them were also witnessed by our CARICOM observer team. They traveled to Guyana in spite of the pandemic and the risks to themselves, and they scrutinized the recount process. The CARICOM Observer team was of the unshakable belief that the people of Guyana expressed their will at the ballot box on March 2nd, and that the results of the recount, certified as valid by the staff of the Guyana Elections Commission, led to an orderly conclusion on which the declaration of the results of the election could and would be made. Therefore, we must ask, on what grounds and by what form of executive fiat does the Chief Elections Officer determine that he should invalidate one vote, far less over 115,000 votes, when the votes were already certified as valid by the officers of the Guyana Elections Commission in the presence of the said political parties? We must remind all that if there is any evidence of fraudulent or improper conduct, then there is a clear and well-accepted route to deal with these matters. It is through an election petition to an election court. Any attempt to provide numbers different from those certified by the staff of the Guyana Elections Commission has left many in shock and wondering what next will happen to frustrate the will of the Guyanese people. The role and focus of political parties must be useful and not obstructive in embracing and promoting the clear and express will of the people. And when we confuse and frustrate that will is when we begin to sow the very seeds of discord and acrimony that we are sworn to dissuade and discourage. The community holds the strong view that no voter must be disenfranchised in determining the credibility of this or any election. It is this commitment to a fair and transparent political process that led CARICOM to send 2 electoral observation missions, one for the elections and one for the recount. In addition, 4 prime ministers accompanied me to talk to both sides and to urge patience, especially after the loss of one life. We thank you, the Guyanese people, for that patience. As you await the finalization of this process, we urge again that you be patient and that you be committed to the fact that no electoral process can replace the life of any Guyanese, or anyone for that matter. There must be room for all, regardless of who wins and who loses. I assure you that the community remains committed to the people of Guyana and remains resolute that the report of its observer mission was very clear in its conclusions as to the will of the Guyanese people as reflected in the recount which they monitored.
Okay, that was the chairman of CARICOM and the Prime Minister of Barbados, Maya Motley, and very strong and almost, I should dare say, in an animated tone, very firm in her words about the role of the Guyana Commission and the level, not in her words, this is my own interpretation, the level of bullyism that has been foisted on the people of Guyana. Again, Joe, I beg your pardon, but Marcy, I'll ask you, having listened to this, what would you say to the supporters of APNU AFC?
You know, I can appreciate, and most persons can appreciate, that supporters of the APNU AFC are heartbroken and obviously would have wanted their party to win. I mean, an election is just that. It is a contest, in its crudest form, a challenge between parties for the right to govern, right? But once an election is completed and once those results are ascertained, and in Guyana's case, the results have been ascertained twice, with the SOPs and on a recount. Okay, so when these results have been ascertained and you know that your party has not been successful and has not achieved the goalposts it needed in order to basically stay in office, you need to sit back and ask yourself, you will go through a few stages. I mean, you'll be angry at first. You will probably be in denial that this thing happened. and then you will look towards hope. But at some point in time, and I think this is where the leadership of the AP and UAFC has taken advantage of you as supporters of the AP and UAFC, because they take that hope that you had, and they stretch it, and they tell you these things that are completely not true. Things like, oh, we won, oh, that dead persons voted, oh, little children voted, 16-year-olds. Those things were not possible. And my message to the supporters would be this: sit down, think about what you are being told. You don't have to wholesale agree and accept anything the PPP says to you, but the PPPC is not the only person speaking to you. You have CARICOM speaking to you. You have a CARICOM report speaking to you. You have the ABC country speaking to you. You have the OAS speaking to you. You have the Secretary of State speaking. It's not just the PPPC. And so you've got to sit back and ask yourself, what am I missing? What are they telling me that does not make sense? And then come to the undeniable conclusion that you are being misled. And you have the power as supporters to say to your leadership, look, stop what you're doing. We appreciate that we fought the good fight. We did what we had to do, but we didn't make it. We didn't succeed this time around. But let's put Guyana first. Let's put the interests of the Guyanese people first. Call on your leaders to concede. Call on your leaders to stop fueling false hopes and false narratives that will essentially incite anger as opposed to peace. You want to be able to, you have the powers to say, look, the leadership, stop your games. The chairwoman of CARICOM is saying the level of gamesmanship is it's literally embarrassing. When are we going to stop playing these games and start looking at rebuilding our credibility, rebuilding our image of Guyana? And that would be really my appeal to the supporters of the AP and UAFC.
Joe, the question stands for you. What would you say to the supporters of the APNU AFC to begin?
I think, Michael, first thing we have to realize, based on everything that I know, is that it is not a large percentage of the APNU AFC who are still in this mode of deniability. Let me say that. A large percentage of the supporters and even members, they want to move on, and they want to move on with their lives. I have noted many of them who used to be strident on social media today, they're off social media commenting or attempting to support their party. And I believe that what is happening is that the leadership is deceiving themselves and deceiving a minimal amount of the supporters of the APNU AFC. Like we are tired, the supporters of APNU AFC, they are tired also. Like we want to get on with the development of this country, they also want the same thing. And so that's the first thing we have to say. And for those who are still pained, we suffer that pain. And Michael and Marcy, you all would remember 2015. We suffered that pain and we lived that pain. But we didn't go in a corner and mope, and we didn't attempt to create discord and raise hate and strife. We lift ourselves up, and under the leadership of Barry Jagdeo, we transform that pain into energy and a commitment to go out there and speak to the Guyanese people, and we ensure we spoke to more people than we normally spoke to, because the strategy of the leader and the leadership was to go beyond the base to go beyond your supportership. And we went into communities that were not traditional communities of the PPP Civic, and we had conversations with people. And you know, today I saw someone showed, was uploaded a snippet of some interview Nigel Hughes had with Rickford Burke. And in all the things he said you have to give credit to Barry Jagdeo, what he did as a leader, how he brought the PPP to this successful place. Whilst the party he supported in government, they failed to reach out and to have conversations and even to give hope and deliverance to the people. And therefore, they have to attempt to go beyond their tribulation and trials. But at the same time, Marcy and Michael and viewers, leadership is a fundamental issue there. Because for me, I am confident that everything that is happening, all the machinations, or as me mostly say, all the gamesmanship, all of that is led and coordinated by one David Granger. He is the architect and he is the person who is strategizing. It is only being executed by the other people, the Armands and the Valda Lawrences and Nagamutus and whoever. But Granger is very much involved because this. Granger must have the same information like his son-in-law has. He must have the same information. And if his son-in-law is suggesting that the information that is available to them, there is nothing that suggests, as he says, that the APNU AFC won these elections. That is what Dominic Gaskin is saying. So Granger has the information, but he has been deceitful. He has been lying to his people. And as the ambassador from Barbados said, what he projects himself as what the Caribbean leaders are suggesting, a sanctimonious gangster. We have been saying he's a charlatan a long time ago. So that's the first point. The second issue is what we are seeing developing, and of course, Michael and Marcy, we have had information that suggests that this is a grand conspiracy beyond APNU. Early in March, we know that senior members in the Guyana Police Force were participants of this conspiracy. We know that the Secretariat, under the leadership of Lowenfield, were participants in this conspiracy to defraud people at these elections. What we didn't know, in a way, is that members that sit on the judicial bench are part, and I would say that without fear and contradiction, that members of the judiciary are also party to this conspiracy. Let me give the viewers
very, very strong words, Joe.
Yes, and I'm seeking to back it up. Lowenfield yesterday, when he submitted his letter with that falsity of a report, he started off, the first paragraph is making mention of the decision of the Court of Appeal. So he was giving a justification for why he thinks he could disenfranchise 115,000 persons. And secondly, Michael, remember when he was to submit his report, you had this stall and you had the Court of Appeal. So it suggests to me that there was a conspiracy with the court to allow for a limb for him to stand on. And importantly, even though the same court granted a stay of 3 days, Lowenfield was in such a hurry to deliver this fictitious report using the judgment coming out of the court as a basis.
Well, let me intervene here, Joe, because two things. While I can appreciate the point that you're making, I want to say this on a bit of caution. we can't accuse a judiciary of taking of Lowenfield's massaging of the decision, right? What he did in that letter is essentially added his own twist, as we have come to accept is the norm of the coalition, especially during the last, well, since the no confidence motion. And to clarify, the court never actually used the word credibility in their decision. When the issue came up as to an interpretation of more votes cast, it didn't say more valid and credible votes. But what Mr. Lowenfield did when he submitted his report yesterday was to say, with the guidance of the Court of Appeals decision, I am submitting what is valid and credible votes.
But the point
So
is,
what
the
he
point
did,
is,
but you can't accuse
no, Marcy, the point is, I know your caution. I'll speak here as a citizen to
These are the words of an office of the court.
Yes, I know your caution as
no, but they're also, but they're also reasonable positions to take.
Listen to me. Listen. We had two judges Monday. If we recall, Reynolds ruled that Older had jurisdiction to hear the other matter. If you recall that. You recall that?
Yes, I recall that.
Secondly, the viewers must recall that Don Gregory was one of the judges who ruled that 34 was a majority of 65. So I'm saying that the evidence suggests to me these are not coincidences. That is the point I am attempting to make. And I'm further saying that the day when Lowenfield was supposed to submit his report based on his instructions, he refused to do that the same day the order was served. And
I will concede to that, yes, definitely.
I am suggesting that there was coordination between Lowenfield and members of the judiciary. That is what I am saying. That is my deducement of everything that has happened in the last 72 hours. Further, I'm saying that he was such in a hurry yesterday to use the decision, Marcy, to make his fictitious report available, even throwing aside the fact that there was a grant of stay in 3 months. So in 3 days, right? So the point I'm making is this, is that we would have difficulty going forward if, in my view as a politician, we have judges who want to enter the political sphere. That's all I'm saying. I am not, and I'm using evidence as the fact, because it cannot be a coincidence where the same, one of the same judges who granted themselves jurisdiction to deal with this matter was one of the same judges at the appeal court who says that 34 is so the political cases go, cases that are determined as being political. I believe that you have judges that are using political judgment instead of legal judgment. That is the fundamental.
Well, let me say this, Joe. Let me say this.
Marcy, I'm going to give you 30 seconds on this because there are some other issues I want us to cover.
Oh, okay. Let me say this. While we do not agree with the decision of the Court of Appeal, and this is why we have utilized the recourse that is available to us, and that is an appeal to the CCJ. Okay, because yes, the decision in its form as presented on Monday has created a confusion in the law or in the application of the law, because by virtue of that decision, what has happened is that the court has basically said that a person who is not satisfied with the results of an election has 2 bites at the cherry to question it. One being before a declaration is made, before a president has been identified, and you can utilize Article 177 and you can come to us and we have jurisdiction to hear that, which in itself is a backdoor to a petition. And then you have Article 163 of the Constitution, which says that if you that the High Court is the only court with the exclusive jurisdiction to listen to an election petition or issues arising out of the validity or claims of illegality and any other issues associated with elections. So yes, the decision has caused a certain imbalance in the equilibrium of our judicial system, which needs clarity. And this is why we have gone to the CCJ. But I say this in the context too, that the APNU-AFC has a recourse mechanism available to it after the declaration of the elections, and that is by an elections petition. And so what they are doing here is just really unacceptable. It's disingenuous. And I personally welcome the statement by the chairwoman, who has really stood steadfast with Guyana. And I say Guyana, not the PPPC, with Guyana, because she has no gains from this. She has no personal benefits from this. But collectively, Guyana is a member of CARICOM. Whatever happens here affects everybody, except it affects the world's perception of our ability or inability to lead. And I personally am disappointed. I'm hurt, as most persons are, by the fact that 114 days have gone and we still cannot get on with the business of the day, which is to take Guyana out of the economic difficulties it is in because of the APNU-AFC coalition mismanagement. And in light of COVID, you have so many other issues to deal with. But hopefully the CCJ, the CCJ is our first appearances tomorrow, where we will do administrative issues, case management, and then the actual hearing will be on the 1st of July.
Okay, colleagues, I want to share with you a joint statement by the heads of mission of the United States, Canada, Britain, and the European Union. And the statement reads, "It is important in our view that every vote cast by every voter be reflected in that declaration in order to ensure that the will of the people of Guyana is respected. That respect includes an election declaration of results that mirrors the order and integrity displayed by the people of Guyana, GECOM, and party officials, as witnessed by domestic and international observers during the 2nd of March general and regional elections. We also know that the CARICOM Observer Mission, referred to as the most legitimate interlocutor by President Granger, concluded on June 15 that nothing we witnessed warrants a challenge to the inescapable conclusion that the recount results are acceptable and should constitute the basis of the declaration of results of the March 2, 2020 elections. The statement goes on to say, we believe election results are long overdue, and in any regard, we applaud the patience, peacefulness displayed by the people of Guyana. Pending the outcome of the appeal to the CCJ, we trust GECOM to meet its constitutional duty to issue a declaration on the basis of the results of the recount as confirmed by CARICOM to ensure the democratic choice of the people is fulfilled. This also it is almost simultaneous release by the Motley statement. Guys, Joe first.
Michael, the point is, from the day of March 3rd, as I always say, just like how we know we won, Granger know he lost the election. They knew that. The issue was always how do they break it to their people that they lost the election. And that is the fundamental issue they have been grappling with. Now, what they couldn't get at the polls, they attempted to get it via fraud through Mingo. And in my view, what they didn't get from Mingo, I suspect they attempted, or they thought, because Granger was in high glowing praises for the CARICOM team whilst they were here and doing their work. You would note that he has not made one statement after the report was released from the CARICOM scrutineers. And that should inform you that is dissatisfied by the report because he couldn't utilize the report to create another narrative. The Secretariat continues their conspiracy. They have never stopped. And again, what APNU-AFC is attempting to do by going to the Court of Appeal was to seek to utilize the courts to give them some victory. Also importantly is that even at the time when the Court of Appeal matter was to be heard, the leadership of the APNU-AFC, including what we call the Attorney General, was saying to their supporters, and even up to today, I have seen posted on Granger page, on APNU-AFC page, that the Court of Appeal was the final court and they had the final say on the matter that was taken to them. So even at this late hour, they are continuing to mislead their supporters. And now when they recognize that what they were telling their supporters, and supporters recognize it was a lie, that the CCJ has jurisdiction and it is the final court, now they're saying that these people are outsiders. So you can't keep up with them every day as they go along on these matters. But what is happening, Michael, as the evidence suggests, is that they're utilizing the period to stay in office, to continue in their corrupt schemes and practices. And that is not to give service to the people. It is to transfer lands, like we have seen all the reports, and transfer property and to issue contracts. I see just a couple of days ago, there's a contract given to BK for $352 million. We see GPL giving Marcy some $678 million contract for some 6 vehicles or whatever that people are saying could be bought for far less than what the prices are. And just remember, as I understand it, that Marcy Group, one of the parties there, senior functionary, who are now functioning at Marcy, was a senior functionary at Ansa McCall when that $600 million contract for drugs was given out by the Ministry of Health with Balder Lawrence's consent to Ansa McCall at the time without any tender. So you can trace the corrupt practices attached to the cronies of the APNU-AFC and the leadership of the APNU-AFC. So that is why they want to stay in government. They're not giving service. People are suffering. They have brought to an end the program that the CDC had to help people during this COVID pandemic. The government don't have a program, a social assistance program presently to deal with this matter. I saw the advertisement coming out of the Ministry of Social Protection, and I wondered which ordinary person in the countryside living in the villages can have access to internet to make application and all the kind of foolishness I saw, when they could have gone to the regional democratic councils and the NDCs and asked them to intervene and to supervise whatever program they want to have happen to help people. People are suffering. People are starving. They have people who don't have anything to eat because many of them have lost their jobs and they have children to take care of. So on one hand, you have people suffering, and on the other hand, the government is giving no service. Thirdly, the economy has gone belly up. The state apparatus has gone bankrupt. And even with all of that, they continue to print, they find money rather, to be involved in corrupt schemes. You know, I didn't know until I learned some time ago. You're going to the supermarket now when you're going to the shops. And when they're giving you change, it's a set of these $50 that we thought at the 50th 2016 anniversary. These money that were printed, they gave out some for souvenir, and the understanding was they would have been kept there in reserve. But the situation of bankruptcy is facing the government so much that even that $50 is now in circulation. And I'm sure, Marcy, you grace the supermarket, and Michael, you might have asked yourself the question, what is the issue with all these $50? But they're out there. And the answer to that question from people who were involved in these matters is that the government has gone even into that reserve of how many 100 millions they had printed those $50 bill during the 50th celebration that we had.
So Marcy, in essence, Joe is saying the economic gas light is on. So we're into the reserve tank. But before you go into the wanton spate of apparent and more than apparent obvious corrupt practices, I ask you first to respond directly to the joint statement by the ABCE countries.
No, the thing is, Michael, is that all the people are doing is following up on what they have said before. It is just that the situation changes, the machination changes, as Motley said, the gamesmanship changes, and she was being very diplomatic. Other senior officials in CARICOM, they see it as gangsterism, not gamesmanship. It's not a G, but not gamesmanship. The CARICOM chair was being very modest. So the people, all the countries, these observers, they have the evidence that the People's Progressive Party won these elections. They have the evidence, and therefore they're just angry and frustrated, like we are, that Granger and his cabal continue to hold on to government, and with the help of conspirators in GCOM, they're trying everything possible to try to deny the people their wishes, but that will not happen. That will not happen. We are sure and confident about that, that democracy will triumph over dictatorship. The people of this country will not allow it. The people who are supporting the people of this country will not allow it. And you would note that all the statements are suggesting, Michael, that we stand with the people of Guyana.
Marcy, your view on the joint statement?
Just like the CARICOM statement, I think it's a welcome statement. I think it shows consistency by the ABCE, who have not only in these elections, but even in 2015 and years before that, elections before that, have always sided with the Guyanese people and the will of the people, enforcing a democracy. And so this statement, this recent statement of the ABC, as well as the statement last night by the OAS, they are both consistent with previous statements. They support democracy, and it really is another subtle call for the APNU-AFC to concede. It is like, once again, you have a chance, an opportunity to say, look, I am going to put the Guyanese people first. I am going to put the interest of the nation first. And at what point in time will you say, would the leadership of the APNU-AFC say that, look, the whole world is telling me that I need to look back at my actions or my inactions and say, stop. When will I say stop? And um, I guess I remain hopeful that that will happen. But even if it doesn't, our appeal to the CCJ and ultimately our faith in the commission will help to bolster that hope that I have.
Importantly,
There,
Michael, is that all the statements in the last 24 hours, you note all of them, they're saying that the results of the recount must be used as the basis for the declaration. You note everyone is saying that. The CARICOM chair was clear that we are standing by this report that our observers, scrutineers, whatever you call them, made available to us of a process that they scrutinized. The OAS had people scrutinizing also, and they have said last evening that the basis for the declaration must be the tabulation of the votes coming out of the recount. So Loinfield and APNU, AFC and Green, they could continue fooling themselves to think that they can have a declaration whereby it is not what reflects the will of the people, more so coming out of the statement of poll and the statement of recount. And look, you would see how these thieves they're not even consistent in their thievery. That's the point.
let me address this point briefly, Joe, on the issue of consistency. We saw a declaration made by Claremont Mingo at the Ashwin's building, which was in sharp contrast to the declaration same person, Claremont Mingo, made at the GCOM headquarters. I think it was on the 13th of March. How do you come up with these figures? And secondly, how do you come up with these variances? Then we saw a declaration made by Keith Lowenfield, which sought to disenfranchise over 323,000 voters, ridiculously so. And then he comes with a second declaration, which disenfranchises over 115,000 voters. What is the basis for these declarations? There is a paucity even of consistency in asininity.
That's the point.
You have to, at least you could be consistent in your silliness.
That's the point I was about to make. That these thieves cannot even be consistent in their attempt to thief. You know, now Lowenfield gave some weeks ago, he gave APNU 40 seats, a majority in the National Assembly. Now, yesterday, he took away 7 of their seats and gave them 33. Lowenfield submitted the proper recount from the proper tabulation from the recount to the Elections Commission, and that extrapolation would have meant that the PVP Civic got 33 seats, whilst the AP and UAFC got 31. Lowenfield turned it on its head. He didn't just disenfranchise people, but what he did is turn that extrapolation on its head. He gave Granger 33 seats, and he gave us, he was generous enough yesterday, Michael, because the last time it was only 25 seats he gave us.
I figure he woke up in a good mood yesterday.
Yeah, he was generous to add another 6 more. And for the new parties, he was generous to hand them their seat yesterday, because when he submitted with his fictitious fantasy permutation of numbers, statistical fantasy, he didn't give the new parties any seat. So yesterday he was in a very generous mood. At least you can say he took away from APNU the first time in this whole process. One of these conspirators took away something from APNU and gave it to us and to the other parties. You know, if it was not so serious, all you do is laugh every day, because this is asininity to the max. And therefore, people ask, Where did Lowenfield get these numbers from? How he come up with it? I mean, he's trying to thief votes on behalf of APNU FC. He don't have to come up with no justification. All he's attempting to do is to have Granger being sworn in. That is all they want to happen. And they have been attempting that since the first week in the elections. By March 7th, Granger was already dressed to be sworn in. The next week also, he was dressed to be sworn in. And so I'm told that coming out of this judgment from the court Monday, Granger again was dressed to be sworn in. So the lunacy continues. But the fact of the matter is, there will only be one president sworn in, and that president of this republic for the next 5 years will be Mohammed Irfan Ali. We're confident about that. That is how this will end. And so for viewers, for members, for supporters, I say what you need is to exercise patience. This can only end one way, where democracy triumphs over dictatorship.
Marcy, our time is practically gone. Your closing arguments, essentially, on one, it seems as though the people of Guyana are staring in the face three concurrent pandemics. One, COVID-19. Two, an attempt to steal an election. And three, an obvious, for all intents and purposes, an obvious raid on the Treasury. Your closing comments.
Those are three serious issues or topics that have all major and far-reaching consequences to everyone in Guyana. But more importantly, I think that it's never too late for the supporters of APNU-AFC to impress upon their leadership to stop the foolishness, aside, concede, and act responsibly. There's no time limit on when a person can grow a conscience or assume rationalness and responsibility. And that also applies to the CEO of GCOM. You know, your credibility is a commodity in that really takes nothing but your integrity to earn. And to lose it over stealing an election, stealing a country, to the detriment of persons who are sick, or, you know, when we should be focusing on the testing and looking after our ill for COVID. And then, of course, the issue of the Treasury, which ultimately affects our economic standing at least for the immediate short term, the next 5 years. And so my call really would be that we need everyone, not just APNU, but everyone needs to rally around the words of the ABCE, Honorable Mia Motley, and everyone who has been calling. And I would say, let's repeat the call for concession. Let's repeat the call for responsible leadership, and let us not lose hope and patience that democracy will win at the end. We have won consistently. And I am using the word consistently very often in this interview, only because we have been consistent in our position since the 2nd of March, and in fact since the no confidence motion. So to our supporters, and really to all Guyanese, just, you've been patient with us this long. Remain steadfast, remain law-abiding, and at the same time remain patient and hopeful that we will resolve all these issues to the betterment and benefit of all Guyanese.
Joe?
The thing is, I echo the same sentiments from Marcy, that for us in the People's Progressive Party Civic, our minds are cast right now in how we transform this country to make it a country that is better for all the people of Guyana. And we are ready and willing, and we want to get off to execute the programs and plans that we committed to the people of Guyana for the betterment. And so all of this 100 and how many days, it's an obstruction. Think about it, Michael, Marcy, and viewers. What we could have accomplished in this 100 and odd days if Irfan Ali was sworn in, and the PPP government was already running. What we would have accomplished. I am sure that in that period we would have accomplished removing VAT from water and light from the elderly, removing VAT from baby formula and all these items, reversing those taxes that are taxing people to death, reinstituting many of the programs we had, I am sure. And all of those would have been for the benefit of the Guyanese people. And so we ask people to be patient. This will be over. We are confident about that. And that is the reason why Michael, Marcy, people like us, and all the other comrades in Guyana and overseas and wherever, and all the supporters, that is the reason why we're steadfast. That is the reason why we commit ourselves to this process. That is the reason why, because we know it will end for the betterment of the people of Guyana.
Joe, you raised a very important point. Had the PPP, had Dr. Irfan Ali been sworn in already, more immediately and urgently in terms of the present, a PPPC administration would have been better able to address and to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also to care for the Guyanese people as it relates from the perspective of relief and other measures. On this note, I thank you, Marcy, Nadir Sharma, and Joseph Hamilton for being a part of this program. The program you have been viewing is Guyana in Transition. Thank you, guys.
Okay, Michael, have a good day.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank our viewers for being a part of this program. Stay tuned. My colleague, you thought will be on at 4 p.m. I'm Michael Gordon. Thanks for watching.